In a small town in southern Iowa, nestled between endless cornfields, there stood an old brick library. The building had been there for over a century, surviving the wear of time and weather. The townspeople cherished it, though they whispered about the strange occurrences that had plagued the library for decades. The library was run by Mrs. Whitlock, a kindly woman in her 70s who had been the librarian for as long as anyone could remember. She loved the library and knew every book, every corner, and every creak of the old wooden floors. Yet, she never stayed after dark. One autumn evening, as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, a young college student named Emily, home for break, visited the library to work on a paper. She was lost in her research and didn't notice the time until the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the library floor. The wind howled outside, and the branches of an old oak tree tapped against the windows like skeletal fingers. Emily looked up at the clock and realized it was past closing time. She quickly gathered her things and headed for the door, but when she reached it, it was locked. Confused, she called out, "Mrs. Whitlock?" But there was no answer. The library was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes your heart race. As she fumbled with her phone to call for help, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the library into darkness. Panic set in, but before she could react, a soft, rhythmic sound echoed through the aisles. It was the unmistakable creaking of old floorboards, as if someone, or something, was walking slowly towards her. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she turned towards the sound. In the dim light from her phone, she could just make out the shape of a woman at the far end of the aisle. The figure was dressed in a long, black dress, her hair pinned up in a style from another era. The woman seemed to glide rather than walk, her eyes fixed on Emily with a hollow, lifeless stare. Terrified, Emily backed away, but as she did, she tripped over a stack of books and fell hard onto the floor. The ghostly figure moved closer, and as she did, Emily could feel the temperature drop, her breath visible in the icy air. Suddenly, the ghostly woman stopped, her expression changing to one of sorrow. In a voice that was barely a whisper, she said, "The books, they must be returned." Emily realized this must be the ghost of a librarian who had worked there long ago, rumored to have died in a fire while trying to save the library's collection. Her spirit had lingered, unable to rest until every book was accounted for. With trembling hands, Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a book she had forgotten to check out. She placed it on the nearest shelf, and as soon as she did, the ghostly woman began to fade. The lights flickered back on, and the oppressive cold lifted. Emily scrambled to her feet, heart pounding, and made her way to the door, which now swung open easily. As she stepped outside, the wind had died down, and the night was calm. She never spoke of what happened that night, but she always returned her books on time after that. And as for the library, the townspeople continued to whisper about the ghostly librarian, still roaming the aisles, making sure every book found its way back to its rightful place.